Developing Tomorrow's Leaders is a podcast that is all about educating, supporting, and inspiring the next generation of leaders. Your host, Antoine Thompson, or Coach T, has over 35 years' experience of educating, supporting, inspiring, and enhancing the lives of many young men and women. In this episode, Coach T speaks with Ryan Schackner, the CEO of A Must Win. Ryan's work focuses on money empowerment, a data and science-based personal branding program and nil engagement programs for athletes of all sports, divisions, and genders.
Right, welcome to another episode of Developing Tomorrow's Leaders. I am your host, Antoine Thompson, or Coach T, and today I am excited because we have another sports fanatic, because I'm a former athlete and also very involved in collegiate athletics. So I hope you all will help me welcome Ryan Schackner to Developing Tomorrow's Leaders. How you doing, Ryan?
I'm good, Coach T. How are you doing?
I'm fabulous as always, my friend, and I'm really great that we had the opportunity to meet each other. We had a great first conversation, and I knew you'd be a great guest here. Your insight in college athletics and this name, image, likeness that's going on in the transfer portal and all these things you have a lot of knowledge on. So I know we're going to talk about that. But the first thing I'd love for you to do is just kind of share with us your journey from being a former athlete to what you're doing now, building one of the largest financial planning firms in the Southeast.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's been quite the journey, because I think a lot like the athletes, some of the kids that you work with and the kids that listen to this, the dream of going pro, I shared that with them, right? My baseball was my passion and my sport. And from an early age, I got some attention from pro scouts. And so from 13 on, that was always, that seed had been planted in the back of my head. And I think like a lot of kids, because of that, and just because of being around athletes growing up, that's really how I identified myself, is that of an athlete. And the goal was to go pro, and made it to, through high school, freshman year of college, last game of my freshman year, I go to warm up and I blow out my shoulder. And it was one of these that could not be repaired. And I had the best. I grew up in Wisconsin. I had the best doctors. I had the Milwaukee Brewer doctors were doing the surgeries, and it just wasn't meant to be. And so, like a lot of athletes that, finish high school sports or college sports or even pro athletes, you get to the point where all of a sudden your career, one day you're that athlete and then the next day it's done. That happened to me very unexpectedly. And I had to figure out who am I? And so I got, I realized that, because I didn't focus, I was so focused on being an athlete, I didn't focus like I should have academically. I was really behind, and I needed to get an internship. And at that point, that was really going to be what saved me. And so I leveraged some of the relationships that I had playing baseball, and got an internship that academically I did not qualify for, but because of that relationship, they gave me an opportunity. And I took full advantage of that. I knew I didn't belong academically. They made it known I didn't belong academically. And when I was around all the other interns, they were talking, I didn't know you could go higher than a 4.0. Apparently you can. But they were that at the biggest schools. And so I didn't let that beat me down. I said, well, I've got some skills too. And I really just leveraged all these lessons and skills that I learned being an athlete, and just transitioned them into the business world. And so I ended up in the top 10 in the company in this internship it was a finance internship for 3 years in a row, and moved down to Charlotte and just kind of got to work, and didn't know anybody, and started just building a financial planning firm, and it grew quickly. We started working with some athletes, and that was fun. And then name, image, and likeness comes along, and boom, here I am.
That is an amazing story. But the one thing that stuck out to me, Ryan, about that story, when you said that you were given an opportunity based on the relationship And relationships are so important in every aspect of life because had you not had that relationship, that opportunity would have never presented itself. True.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%.
Yeah. And then I think the other part is I wanted to ask you, what was your initial emotional reaction when your career ended that quickly? Because I know it did. You don't get over that overnight because you're probably trying to figure out there's got to be a way for me to get back into it and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, to even to the extent that I started throwing left-handed, thinking that I could be a left-handed pitcher, and did somewhat decent at that, but not enough to compete. I'd say the biggest, mentally, it was very, very hard for a while. It wasn't like a week where it was, tough. It was probably a year to 2 years where it was really, really difficult because you're used to your life is scheduled, right? You're used to this routine, and now all of a sudden the routine is taken away and you don't know anything else but that routine. So it's really it's trying to figure out where you belong in life. Do you still talk to the guys that were on the team? Do they look at you differently? It's all of these things. And so probably it wasn't diagnosed, but I probably went through a period of depression for a while
Oh, I bet.
until I started getting success and seeing success in other things. And then I realized that, hey, I defined myself as an athlete. Others defined me as an athlete, but that was just a small piece of what I did. And while I didn't know it at the time, athletics was teaching me all these lessons and giving me all these skills that I'm able to steal and use in, this life after sports. And so once I got, into the flow and started seeing success other places, then I started to get over it. But yeah, it was mentally, it was extremely difficult. And I think, from the pros and college athletes, even those guys that have and girls that have careers lined up. I mean, you look at someone like a Tom Brady. I think part of the reason he came back that last year was because that was him from early ages to in his 40s. He had that routine and he didn't want to let it go because he didn't know, even though he had a broadcasting deal for like $350 million. That wasn't him, right? He's an athlete and that's how he viewed himself. And so, I think everybody goes through it regardless of the level and what you have lined up. But the sooner you can start working on, that life after, the better.
Better. Yeah. Kind of reminds me of my dad because he served 30 years in the Marine Corps. So you think about a regiment,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
30 years of, getting up at old dark 30, as they used to say, right? Yeah, interesting. Well, this is a great time to shift because you kind of made reference to talking about college and professional athletes. And I'd love to start with, for those that don't know, we're going to talk about NIL and the most basic terms so people kind of understand. Because I know when it first came out, a lot of people like, oh my God, what is this? What is this? What is this? And then there's so many, I'm sure there are different layers to it, but I'd love for you just to kind of share with us in layman's terms, what NIL is.
Yeah, well, I simplify everything. And so I think it's actually pretty easy, right? So it's name, image, and likeness. And so what you have to understand is that prior to July 1st, 2021, a college athlete couldn't go out and get a job. They couldn't really earn revenue because it would be thought of by the NCAA as they have this job or this internship because they are an athlete. And that would be an improper benefit, and they weren't allowed that. Well, at the same time, you have athletes that weren't getting enough food over the summer. You think about athletes you've got to feed the machine, feed the engine, and they didn't have money to get food. They couldn't go out and create internships and get jobs and get experience. And so prior to July 1, 2021, you couldn't earn money as an athlete. And so then that flipped. And what it said was, hey, these athletes are helping the school and the NCAA bring in tremendous amounts of revenue. I mean, the NCAA alone is a 21 billion with a B, a dollar a year nonprofit. Okay. And so these athletes were being leveraged to create this massive financial windfall for both the institutions and the NCAA. And and now they can, because of their position and because of the notoriety that they have, now they can earn money, right? And the primary arguments against them were, well, they get this, they get scholarships, and then they get the chance to go pro, and they can earn hundreds of millions of dollars. Well, the reality is, outside of a few athletes, when you look at, like an Auburn or a big Power Five has between 500 and 900 student athletes, a very small percentage of those go to school for free. Most of them have student loans in some capacity, and again, they don't have the time, and so they're outlaying money, so they're not getting these free free education. And even if they go pro, most of them aren't first rounders. I mean, we have the NFL draft coming up here, and there's going to be 30 first round picks, and the higher you get to number one, the more money you're going to make guaranteed, but it pretty significantly, it gets cut down after that. And so most of these athletes have between a 3 to 5 year average career, and they're earning league minimums, which granted are still very, very good for a first job out of school. But it's not that, $50 million sum of money, after agent fees and taxes, which are treated different than anybody else. Maybe they're walking away with a league minimum, $200,000. Again, very good money, first job out of school, but you're not retiring for life off of that. And so you have that reality side of the typical arguments against it. And so now it's really, athletes can make money. And we've seen that kind of manifest in two ways. We have the business of NIL, which is what all the media talks about, right? Where you see the in a sense, the legalized pay for play, where you have these collectives, which are just boosters collecting money and creating NIL opportunities or endorsement opportunities for athletes for specific sports and specific positions at specific schools. And so they get money for that. And then off of that, you also have this influencer where you have, like the Livy Dunns down at LSU and the Twins down at Miami. And what people don't understand is that's a full-time job in and of itself. And they didn't wait for NIL to start building a following. They were doing that prior to NIL becoming a thing. And so it was kind of like the right place at the right time. And so full-time job on top of school, on top of athletics, and congrats to them. They're taking advantage of it. So you have what's the business side, which is kind of evolved out of it. But then you have the spirit of NIL. And what it was really intended for was that entrepreneurial aspect where the athlete can say, hey, I've got some connections in the community. Let me make those connections and turn that into an avenue for me to earn some money. And so that's really at the high level, as simplest. Those are that's what NIL is. And that's kind of the two areas that we see. And the one that gets the most publicity, of course, is the Bryce Youngs that are getting, $1 million, or the influencer approach.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that in depth because it makes a lot of sense. But as I kind of go back a few years when we knew that this was probably going to happen, when the boosters we all know boosters were sliding kids money. They've been doing it for years. You just didn't know about it, right?
Yeah, it wasn't legal.
Right. Wasn't legal. So now they found a way around it. But you mentioned the Twins of Miami, and if I'm not mistaken, they've decided to give up basketball because I think they had another year of eligibility, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yep.
And because they're making so much money, right?
Yeah, I think so. I'm not inside their heads. I think it was a combination. The NCAA definitely made them a target. So I think that played into it. And I think some of what has evolved off of that, off of their influencing and all that, they could pursue other opportunities, and, time was right. And so why burden yourself with, this structure that you have to stay in when you could really unleash it and take full advantage of it. But I think that's why you see a lot of, like Paige Bucher up at UConn, who stayed at UConn instead of, declaring for the WNBA draft, because she's going to make a lot more money playing college at UConn than she is as a pro in the WNBA. And so, which, then you could argue both sides of that. Is it better for her to stay in college and develop before she gets to that pro level, so she's more mature and all that? I would say yes. And so, I think there's some good sides to NIL that people tend to overlook, because, it's not the traditional method of college athletics. It's not what was going on when we grew up. And so, because of that, because it's new, we say, I don't like it. And, but I think there are definitely some good aspects to it.
Yeah. I think this is a good opportunity to talk about the transfer portal and NIL, because I'm assuming there's a correlation between the two. Is there not, for some athletes?
Yeah. I think, yes. Now, should there be? Probably not, but yeah, there's definitely a correlation.
Yeah, you care to share with us kind of how you see, and just from your perspective, how the NIL is affecting the transfer portal and vice versa?
Yeah, I think there's two groups that it affects, right? You have the college kids that are declaring for the portal, and then you have the high school kids. Right. And so if we look at just the college level first, I think there's you're seeing, let's take a sport like baseball or something like that, where you have, and I'm a Tennessee baseball fan, but you have Tennessee who, has a stacked team, and it was just a reload after a really great year last year. And so, but that's a sport where not every athlete, in fact, probably no athlete, is getting a full scholarship, right? They have limited scholarships. And so what they do is they split them between the players. And what they're able to do is they're able to say, hey, you have this NIL money from the collective, which you can use however you want. It could go to pay for your college education. And so you see some of that, and some schools using it that way, being able then to have opportunities that the best athletes will go out and seek. But on a very high level, what the transfer portal does is it allows kids one-time transfer from a D1 to another D1 4-year school without having to sit out and put their life on hold, because prior to the portal, they would have to transfer. They would have to get released. Sometimes they would be able to go to schools inside the conference. Sometimes they wouldn't be able to, but they would have to sit out a year athletically before they got to get back on the field or the court. And so, but then you had the coaches who were, leaving and coaching right away. And so there was kind of that battle of, you have to do something for these athletes. And so at the college level, that's what we're seeing. I think there's a lot more student athletes that go into the portal than get opportunities, which is the interesting piece of it. But then you have the high school athletes, right? Because high school, college recruiting now at the high school level is completely different than it was prior to NIL, but then also the transfer portal, because whereas college coaches, and we see it all the time, they're on the hot seat and they have to worry about winning, because winning gives them job security. And so bringing on a high school athlete is a risk for them. And it's risky because, this high school athlete maybe hasn't lived away from home, hasn't had to get up and go to class. They're physically not as mature, emotionally not as mature. Are they going to be able to handle the college athletically and the academic course load. There's a lot of questions, right? And are they going to be able to come in as a freshman and play right away? In some sports, in some cases, yes, but the vast majority are going to take a redshirt year so that they can get bigger, get stronger, so that they can compete better the following year. And so if you're a coach and now all of a sudden you have athletes that have proven that they can get up and go to class, that they are, bigger physically, possibly more mature mentally, they've lived away from home, they can handle the college life, and you have to win now. Well, in theory, it's going to take less time to develop that transfer student than it will that high school student. And so what we're seeing is college coaches that are going and saying, hey, I've got 4 scholarships. I'm recruiting a position. Let's say it's football, defensive back. I've got 4 scholarships to give. I'm going to allocate 2 of those to the college transfer portal. I'm going to pick up 2 guys there. And then I'm going to take 2 of those for the high school athletes. And so now you have that coach who before the portal would have had 4 scholarships for high school athletes, now is only going to allocate 2 of those. And so you have, less supply from the college, the scholarship level but the same demand at the high school level. And so now it's, how are you as a high school athlete? I think the portal's taking away some opportunities that would have normally been there. But then how are you as a high school athlete setting yourself apart? Because athletically, the line is so, they're so blurred from athletic talent to athletic talent at the college level. Everybody's a lot closer together. So how are you setting yourself apart in other ways to make it an easier decision for that college coach?
You just explained something that makes total sense to me now that I never thought about. 2 things. One, I didn't think about the number of high school students that are going to have a harder time now getting those scholarship opportunities because of so many players. Because every day I see just a huge number of kids entering the portal. And then you just said that just because you go in doesn't mean you get picked up. The other part was you also clarified to me too that this is openly accepting by coaches because they realize, hey, this is how I'm going to build my team. And I'm a Tar Heel fan, so obviously I've been watching what Hubert's been doing at Carolina with 6 players to enter the portal. But this raises a question I wanted to ask you, and it's just your opinion. Why do you think so many players are just jumping around so quickly? Like I'm thinking about it from old school mindset. Here you are, you're recruiting me, and you go, hey, listen, you will have an opportunity. You're Dean Smith telling me you're going to have an opportunity, but you're going to have to earn it. But now kids don't want to earn it. They're going to just go give it to me. That's kind of how I see what the portal does for some of these kids.
Yeah, I think there's definitely some of that. But I think on the flip side, you have kids that had dreams and thought that they could play at a Carolina. And now they realize that, wow, I'm maybe going to see 2 or 3 minutes a game if I stay here. I really want to play ball. And so maybe by transferring, now I get that opportunity to play. So I think there's some of it is recognizing that, maybe I don't belong here at this school, or, now there's a coaching change, so I don't fit that system. And so there's an avenue now for them to take an out. Right. But I think there is definitely some of it where, I didn't like how coach talked to me, I'm gonna go somewhere else.
Yeah.
And there's a danger, in my opinion, there's a danger in recruiting just from the portal because, I think when you look at the great programs across the board, like Dean Smith, or if you fast forward now, you have like a Clemson football or an Alabama football. There's a culture there that is arguably as important as the talent that comes in and feeds that culture. And the coaches really want to protect this. Well, if you start getting, and what they've been able to do in the past is take that high school athlete, and bring them along and help them grow up in that culture. Well, now when you bring in these, the transfer portal, you're risking that culture, right? Because now there's less people at an earlier age coming through that. And so I think there's definitely a danger to how many transfer portal, kids do you bring in? Yeah, it's a mess. I mean, that's where you see, like a Dabo who previously was saying, we're not going to recruit out of the portal because, their culture was more important than getting that little bit of edge in a certain position. Now, I think you're seeing some of that get refined because there's definitely kids that fit the culture. And so it's just, are they being discerning and selective in order to get the right kid into the system?
Yeah. Well, I'll be remiss if I didn't bring up Colorado football and we talk about this portal thing, right? Because I'm following that like everybody else is
And
following
me too, man. I
politics.
love it. And I
Yeah,
love it.
I'm with you, but because I think the reason I do is because of what you just mentioned, culture. Dion knows what he wants as far as culture, and he's recruiting that through the portal. And I think it was 18 or 16 guys after that first spring ball decided they're entering the portal, and probably the guys that were sitting in there in that first meeting is what I'm assuming.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's that element because, he's going to be judged rightly or wrongly. And, I would say, these coaches don't have a long shelf life, right? They don't get a lot of time to prove themselves. Colorado made a significant investment, more so than they've ever made in a coach before. And what do they want? They want results. And when do they want them? They want them right now. Well, the reality is you're rebuilding a program that has been down for 2 decades. And so to do it the traditional way is going to take 6 to 8 years. But he's not going to get that much time, even though he should and all of that. That's just the reality of what he's dealing with. So how do we get the kids that can help us improve so that we can then use and we can start filtering in more of these high school recruits? And, he's a perfect example. I mean, it couldn't be better. He couldn't be better for the time and the era of college sports that we're in right now, because he's having very frank conversations with these athletes. It's not all love and flash, and it comes from a place of love, but he's being very direct on, you need to do this better. And listen, it's okay if you don't fit here. You can go somewhere else. That's fine. And he's almost being a parent to a lot of these kids, right? So he saw a need that was lacking in college athletics, and he saw that he had the skills to fulfill that. And he's just leveraging, he's doing outreach, quite frankly, and he's just leveraging football as a way to do it. And he's bringing a lot of attention to it. And I think it's a great thing. I think if more coaches looked at that, they would be able to find wins that they could, adapt into their program that would help them. So.
Oh, I think it's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out, because as well as I do, if they have a successful season, that he started something that's going to be, I mean, it's going to be big. And I think one of the reasons that I follow it, Ryan, to be honest with you, I just love the excitement that he's bringing to the university. Yes. And I think that that's the thing that everybody's, kind of surrounding around it. And he's bringing the energy and be quite frankly, that's what coaches are supposed to do. I mean, I think that get the kids excited about being a part of something, and he wants kids that are going to go to the end of the field. I mean, from end to end, you know what I mean. But I think it's just a great thing for sports, and I'm just watching it every day of it, and I think it's a great thing. But I would, before we kind of shift over to your company, Must Win, I wanted you if you had a couple stories that you could share with us that you think would be best. It could be some of your own or some that you know about. But I always love to talk to people about sports and sports stories.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll tell you a recent one, right? And I can't right now. I can't mention the names, but they're big name basketball players, because we're trying to work out some things here, and because we're working on a platform that I think and I think they see it as going to change athlete development. And you have this, this conversation, are athletes mentors, and should that be, should kids look up to athletes? And you can argue whether it should or shouldn't be. The reality is it happens. And so knowing that, we have, such a small percentage of these athletes are even going to go from high school to college, and then to go to college and go pro is such a small percentage, that it leaves a lot of athletes to go through what we talked about earlier, is that, what is my actual value, right? And so, talking to a couple big names that have come out of the state, and we were just talking about, well, what needs to happen? What needs to shift? And I just asked them about these business opportunities that they've built. Tell me about some of the businesses that you've helped start and that you're involved in, and the skills that you used as an athlete. And we're talking, you've got athletes like an Anthony Tolliver, who played 14 or 15 years in the NBA, who's invested in companies and has a huge real estate portfolio that I would argue is more successful in the business world than he was in the basketball world. And this guy lasted 14 years in the NBA. You've got, big athletes, like you have like a Chris Paul or a Steph Curry, who from a business standpoint are doing some crazy innovative things. And then you don't even have to take those big name athletes. You work the way down, and you have like a Marcus Ogden, who's up in the Raleigh, North Carolina area, who at one point had out of DC, one of the largest African-American owned commercial construction companies. He made some mistakes, admittedly, and he lost it, but has rebuilt himself to now he's got the top 0.5% podcast in the world, does business coaching. And so I think you have what is, if we would talk about it more, right? These athletes that are doing really, really innovative and successful things outside of athletics. And where people have said that they shouldn't have they have no business doing that because they're just an athlete, or they don't have, an advanced degree and that sort of stuff. And so, some of these businesses and some of the stuff that these athletes are doing inside the community is amazing. And so it's almost a story of encouragement of these kids that are, playing ball, on your teams you play against, of, yeah, I hope you chase your dream. I hope you go pro, but whatever you want to accomplish athletically, I pray that it happens. But at the same time, what are these other opportunities that you're not thinking about because you're just identifying as this, one individual? I just think it's hopefully there's more to come on that. But I think if we see some more of these athletes, these big time athletes, talk about this and be candid about some of the opportunities that athletics has provided them, it might be where, we have, one gentleman who played for Bob Stoops at Oklahoma. He was a linebacker, got a chance to go and be with the Chicago Bears, and was in training camp, and called his dad and said, "Hey, I was a beast in college. Everybody's a beast here. I'm bruised. I'm beat up. Like, there's got to be a better way to earn $200,000 a year." And his dad said, "Sounds like you want to retire. That's fine. Go tell coach and give me a call." Well, he did that. He retired from football because of the relationships. Stoops got him into law school the next day. Like, he was there Monday. He was sitting in law school, and he's since went on to be probably the leading expert in the United States on environmental law, and has 300 some rental properties, and has these cryogenic labs throughout Colorado that all the colleges and pro team, the athletes, come to. And he's doing Mr. Olympia stuff, and he's probably making more than most professional athletes, right? Yeah. And so you've got these, you paint this picture of what these kids think being a pro is, and it isn't always that. And knowing that they have these skills that are kind of on the back burner, that they can pretty quickly go in and adapt, and as long as they've built the right relationships, have probably better opportunity than what athletics can provide.
That's amazing. Holy crap. Give up football and making probably 20 times what he was making in football, probably.
Oh, I mean, I think it's up in like the 12 to 15 range. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, man, that's so crazy. But this is a great segue into a must win. I want you to share what it is, what you do, and more an extensive explanation. Kind of the stores are kind of part of what you do, and
Yeah,
I think it's
absolutely.
great. I think it's
Yeah.
great.
So really what we do is we you could encompass it in athlete development. And we work with, at the pro level, we work with professional athletes, we work at the college level, and we work even now at the high school level. And it's really in three capacities. And the first is the financial empowerment, financial development. And the goal is to make it extremely easy to understand, make it extremely entertaining, and to put you in a point or a position of discernment so that you can filter out, hey, is the person that's investing my money doing the right thing? How do I hold them accountable? And that you're in control, right? So that you're not taken advantage of. And so we do that on the personal finance side. And what I noticed, like I mentioned, that so many of these athletes are having so much success in the business world. And we had NIL that popped up, and people were calling me, asking me for, can you help me build my brand? Which when I got to thinking about, and I connected with a lot of these athletes and made some of these connections, that they all realized a couple things, that they had bled, they had sacrificed, they had worked for this dream and this end destination, which they thought was pro athletics. And they realized through time that they saw guys that were more talented than them that didn't last as long. And they knew that, hey, at some point this is going to end, and it became a reality. So what they thought was their final destination was really just the last stop before their final destination. And so we said, how do we show these athletes, right? How do I show myself as a college athlete coming up that I have these talents that can be applied in the business world, right? And I knew that I needed evidence, right? Me just going in and telling someone that, hey, you could be a doctor or you could be an attorney, and patting them on the butt and saying, go get them, kid, wasn't going to work, right? I needed to show them evidence. And so we built out an assessment that is able to identify strengths, weaknesses, help them learn how they can communicate better, how they can receive communication, careers that they align with, business opportunities that they align with. And we show them how to build their brand, how to figure out what's unique about them, create self-awareness, which then feeds into better mental health. How do we create a brand that we can start building for recruiting purposes for high school athletes, for NIL purposes for high school and college athlete, or endorsement opportunities for pro athletes? And at the same time, how do we help them connect and build relationships with people that there's a high likelihood of them getting along with, because we have these assessments and we're able to guide them in that direction so that they can create opportunities for life after sports. And so whenever that time comes, it's not that 10 or 15 years of wandering around. It's maybe you take a month and decompress a little bit, but you've got opportunities waiting for you. And so we teach that. We call that branding, NIL and beyond, brand building for NIL. But we do it with data. We do it with science. And it's really with an eye on, the 50 or 60 years they're going to spend after athletics versus, their time in athletics. And then the last thing we do is with NIL, we notice that the business, like I mentioned earlier, the business side of it gets so much attention. And that's such a small percentage of the overall opportunities. And these kids are chasing these Fortune 500 companies when there's 31 million other businesses in the United States that could benefit through using NIL. And so part of that NIL engagement is teaching these kids, like we were down at Citadel last week, teaching these kids how to shift the narrative on what's possible. And then being able to go and get opportunities, as well as teach the business community how to take advantage of NIL and use it.
Well, I can tell you what, Ryan, there's a whole bunch of former athletes in the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s, and the early 2000s that could have used your services.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've seen those stories of people that just lost all their money, living on the streets. I mean, doing a regular 9 to 5 because they didn't plan ahead. And this is one of the things I love about what you're doing, because you're providing these professionals, but more importantly, these up and coming young people, a plan to be successful before, during, and after athletics. And I think that's what's really important. And that's phenomenal stuff, man. Love it, love it, love it. And you say you work with professional athletes, college athletes, as well as high school,
As well as
right?
high school. Yep. We just started working with high school athletes. We did hopefully we got some stuff with CMS that's going to be coming on. And I know we've got up in Winston-Salem, we're going to be up there in June. And I don't know the details of that one yet, but I know we're going to be up there in June for, 200 or so people up there. So.
Yeah, that is amazing, my friend. I really appreciate all the knowledge. And I know for me, the explanation about the NIL and the in-depth explanation you provided makes a lot more sense now. When I hear things, I'm going to really understand it a little bit more. I think everybody's thinking, use my name, my image, or likeness, I make money. I mean, it is that simple, but I think everybody's kind of thinking a little differently. And I like the fact that you are teaching them how to use it and be smart about it. And the big part is, don't follow this Fortune 500s, man. There's so many other companies. You start piling those all on, you can make more with them than you can going with the big dogs, right? Because everybody's going after the big dogs, and they only can pick so many.
Yep,
right?
exactly, 100%.
Yep. Well, one last question for you, Ron, if I may, and I ask all of my guests here as I pop up your contact information. If you could share with us the person or persons that have influenced you the most in your life, and why?
Yeah, I think you look at my parents, right? My dad came out of he was the first of my family on that side to graduate from high school. And then go to college and graduate from college. His parents both dropped out and worked in a factory, because that's just what they did. And then my mom grew up on a farm, and you picture the one little schoolhouse, right, that we think was back in, on the prairie when people were, moving to California and going west for the first time. Well, that was a reality for her, right? And so being the first to go to college and graduate college and her family, and then, it's just the courage that it took to do that, that unknown in a area where they didn't belong, right? And to fight through that is cool.
Yeah, no, I always love when people say it's family, because there's always some different people, but there's always somebody in everybody's family that's made an impact. So I appreciate you sharing that. Ryan, thank you so much, my friend. This has been great, and I know we'll stay in touch. And I didn't mention, but we're actually in the same state. We're not far from each other, about an hour from each other. So we definitely got to meet up and have lunch there and some coffee or something. Just not Starbucks. I'm not a Starbucks guy.
No, I don't drink coffee, so you're good there.
No, I got to have my coffee, man. I got to have coffee. That's so whatever your beverage of choice. How about that? Get
Perfect.
together. So
Sounds good.
Yeah. And real quick, your website is amustwin.com. If you all want to check that out, and his email address is ryan@amustwin.com. Well, Ryan, thank you so much, my friend, and I wish you all nothing but continued success, and appreciate you taking time to join me today.
Thank you for the opportunity. I enjoyed it.
My pleasure. As always, I'm Coach T. I'm here to educate, support, and inspire the next generation of leaders. Until next episode, we'll see ya.
Coach T's new book, The Ultimate Guide to Success for Preteens and Teens, is the perfect resource for preteen and teen personal growth and development skills. The program applies Coach T's 3 key components: simplicity, effort, and attitude. Order your copy today on Amazon.